Oleander Street doesn't look like a place where anything bad happens. It's 4 blocks long, tucked into a corner of a small Alabama town where the pine trees lean in close and the porch lights come on before the sun even finishes setting. There's a church at one end and a Baptist cemetery at the other, and in between, 17 houses that have watched 3 generations of the same families grow up, grow old, and get buried a quarter-mile away. For 60 years, the worst thing that happened on Oleander Street was a stolen bicycle. Then, over the course of 11 months, 5 houses were broken into. 2 families were tied up in their own living rooms. 1 man was hospitalized. And nobody, not the sheriff's department, not the state investigators, not the private security firm the neighborhood eventually hired, could explain how the person doing it always seemed to know exactly when a house would be empty, exactly where the valuables were kept, and exactly how to disappear before anyone got a good look at a face. This is the story of the Oleander Street break-ins. And by the end of it, you'll understand why the people who lived through it still lock their doors twice. Before we get into it, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and tap the bell so you get notified the moment a new case drops. Cases like this one come out every week, and you don't want to miss the next one. To understand what happened on Oleander Street, you have to understand the street itself. It's the kind of place where everybody knows everybody's schedule. Mail carrier comes at 11. Trash pickup is Tuesday. The Whitfield family goes to Wednesday night service. The Coopers leave for their lake house every second weekend of the month, like clockwork, and have for 15 years. The Nguyen family, at the far end near the cemetery, run a small home bakery out of their kitchen and are up before dawn every Saturday firing up the ovens. It's a neighborhood built on routine, the kind of comfortable, predictable rhythm that makes a place feel safe. Doors get left unlocked. Spare keys sit under flower pots that everyone, including the mailman, knows about. Kids ride bikes until the streetlights come on and nobody worries. That predictability, it would turn out, was exactly the problem. The first break-in happened on a Tuesday night in early spring at the home of Carol and Whitfield, a retired schoolteacher who lived alone since her husband passed. Carol had gone to her sister's for dinner, a standing weekly arrangement, and came home around 9:30 to find her back door standing open and her jewelry box, sitting right where it always sat, on top of her dresser, completely empty. Nothing else in the house was touched. Not the television. Not the silver in the dining room hutch. Not even the cash sitting in a coffee can in the kitchen, which Carol kept for the grandkids' allowance and which any garden variety burglar would have grabbed on the way out. Just the jewelry box. Cleaned out and closed again, lid shut like it hadn't even happened. The responding deputy noted no forced entry. The back door had been unlocked. Not broken, not jimmied, just unlocked, the way it always was when Carol left for a few hours in a neighborhood where nobody thought twice about that kind of thing. She filed a report. The sheriff's office logged it as a simple burglary. Nobody on Oleander Street thought much more about it. These things happen, people said. Probably some kid passing through, looking for something quick to pawn. 3 weeks later, it happened again. The second house belonged to Daniel and Renee Cooper, 2 doors down from Carol, and it was, notably, one of their lake house weekends, the ones everybody on the street knew about, because the Coopers had been doing it for 15 years and never made a secret of it. When they came home Sunday evening, their home office had been gone through with what Daniel would later describe as surgical precision. A locked filing cabinet had been opened without a mark on it. Inside, an envelope of cash they kept for emergencies was gone. So was a small collection of rare coins Daniel had inherited from his father, coins that weren't on display anywhere, weren't insured separately, weren't something a random burglar could have known to look for unless they'd had real time alone in that house, unhurried, searching room by room. Whoever had been in that house knew exactly what they were looking for and exactly where to find it. This time, the sheriff's department paid closer attention. A detective, we'll call him Detective Marsh for this telling, since names have been changed, was assigned to look at both break-ins together. He noted the similarities immediately. No forced entry, no ransacking, no obvious signs of a struggle or a rush job. Just quiet, targeted theft from homes that had been empty for a known, predictable window of time. Marsh pulled both reports side by side and started building a simple timeline on a legal pad, dates, times, what was taken, what wasn't. 2 data points isn't a pattern yet, not officially, but Marsh had worked property crime long enough to recognize the shape of one forming. His working theory was simple. Somebody knew this street, knew the schedules, knew which houses would be empty and when. That meant, in all likelihood, whoever was doing this either lived on Oleander Street or was close enough to someone who did. That idea didn't sit well with anyone. Marsh went door to door that week, asking soft, careful questions. Had anyone hired new help recently? Had any strangers been seen loitering? Had anyone had visitors, contractors, delivery workers with reason to be inside the house? Most people answered politely and thought nothing more of it. A few felt, for the first time, a small flicker of unease about people they trusted for years without a second thought. The third break-in came almost 2 months later, and it changed how the whole street thought about what was happening. It hit the Alvarez household, a family of 4 near the middle of the block. Unlike the first 2, this wasn't an empty house during a known absence. It happened on a weekday afternoon while the parents were at work and the 2 teenage kids were supposed to be at football practice. A late cancellation meant the older son, 16-year-old Mateo, came home 2 hours early. He found the back door open and, for a brief, heart-stopping moment, heard movement upstairs. Mateo did the smart thing. He didn't go up. He backed out of the house, called his mother, and waited on the front porch of a neighbor's house until she got home 15 minutes later. By the time deputies arrived, whoever had been inside was long gone, out a side window, based on a disturbed flower bed beneath it, into the same stretch of woods that ran behind several backyards on the street. This time, a laptop was missing, along with a small fireproof safe the Alvarez family kept in a bedroom closet, containing passports and a modest amount of cash. The safe itself weighed close to 40 pounds. Whoever took it either had help or was strong enough and confident enough to carry it out through a wooded escape route without being seen. Detective Marsh now had 3 break-ins with a common thread. Every single one had targeted a home where the intruders seemed to know, in advance, when the house would be vulnerable. And for the first time, there was physical evidence. A partial shoe print in the disturbed flower bed, a men's work boot, roughly a size 11, with a distinctive worn patch on the left heel suggesting an uneven gait or an old injury. It was a small detail. Nobody knew yet how much it would matter. For a while, nothing happened. Early autumn came and went. The street's uneasy hum of suspicion, the sideways glances, the new deadbolts appearing on doors that never used to need them, started to fade. People wanted to believe it was over. Some optimists on the neighborhood group chat suggested that with 3 cases now under real investigation, whoever was responsible had likely gotten spooked and moved on to easier targets elsewhere. They were wrong. In late August, the Palmer family, a young couple with a 6-year-old daughter, new to the street, having moved in only 8 months prior, woke up just after 2 a.m. to the sound of their back door being forced open. Unlike the previous break-ins, this one wasn't quiet, and it wasn't during an empty house. Mark Palmer got up to check on the noise and found a figure in his kitchen, dressed in dark clothing, wearing what he later described to police as a plain ski mask. Mark shouted. The intruder didn't run right away. He shoved Mark hard into the kitchen counter, knocking the wind out of him and bruising 2 ribs, before bolting out the back door and disappearing into the tree line behind the house. Mark's wife, upstairs with their daughter, called 911 with shaking hands, certain for a moment that this was the night everything on Oleander Street finally went from unsettling to catastrophic. Nothing was even taken this time. Investigators believed the intruder had been interrupted mid-search, possibly by the sound of the family's dog barking upstairs. But something had changed and everyone on the street felt it. The person doing this wasn't just a quiet thief working empty houses anymore. They were willing to confront someone, willing to use force, when things didn't go according to plan. A pattern of careful, victimless theft had crossed a line into something that could easily have ended in tragedy. Oleander Street stopped feeling safe overnight. Within days, half the block had new locks installed. A neighborhood watch text chain went up, with people reporting every unfamiliar car, every stranger walking a dog they didn't recognize. Fear was doing what fear does, spreading faster than facts. Suggested spot for a mid-video ad, right here on the cliffhanger. Viewers now know the intruder is willing to turn violent, and don't yet know who it is, a strong point to hold attention through a break. A line like the one below can smooth the transition back in. If you're just now hearing about this case for the first time, you're not alone. Most people outside this small stretch of Alabama never did. We'll be right back with how investigators finally closed in. What happens to a small, tight-knit street when the person terrorizing it might be one of their own? It turns on itself. Within weeks, the friendly, familiar rhythm of Oleander Street curdled into something colder. Neighbors who'd shared porch coffee for a decade started avoiding eye contact. A rumor took hold that the culprit had to be someone with intimate knowledge of the street. Maybe a relative visiting one of the families, maybe someone who did odd jobs in the neighborhood, maybe, some whispered, someone who lived there and had for years. Suspicion fell, unfairly and painfully, on a teenager named Tyler Briggs, the 17-year-old grandson of one of the street's older residents, who mowed lawns for half the block and therefore had legitimate reason to be in and out of nearly every yard on the street. For a few ugly weeks, Tyler was treated like a suspect by half his neighbors, despite having a solid alibi for at least 2 of the incidents, and despite there being no actual evidence connecting him to anything. His grandmother stopped bringing him along to church potlucks, worried about the stares. It took a direct, public statement from Detective Marsh, clearing Tyler by name at a community meeting, to put an end to it. It's a detail worth sitting with, because it's so common in cases like this. Fear doesn't wait for proof. It looks for the nearest convenient target, and it finds one, often an innocent one, long before the real answer surfaces. Detective Marsh, to his credit, didn't chase the rumor. He kept working the pattern: schedules, timing, access. He cross-referenced the shoe print from the Alvarez house against every service provider, contractor, and delivery worker who had a documented reason to have visited the affected homes over the past year. It was slow, unglamorous work, pulling old invoices, calling landscaping companies, checking pest control logs, but it was that pattern, not gossip, not suspicion, that eventually cracked the case. The break came from an unlikely place, a doorbell camera. Not on Oleander Street itself. None of the affected houses had one at the time, which was part of why the intruder had operated so freely for so long. The camera belonged to a house 1 street over, whose driveway offered a partial view of the cut-through path behind the tree line where the Palmer family's intruder had fled back in August. Detective Marsh, canvassing wider than anyone had before, found that camera and pulled the footage. It was grainy, and it was brief. About 4 seconds of a figure moving quickly along the tree line at 2:14 a.m., the same night as the Palmer break-in. But it was enough to catch a distinctive detail, a limping, uneven gait favoring the left leg, a detail that lined up, unmistakably, with the worn heel pattern from the shoe print found at the Alvarez house months earlier. That detail mattered because Detective Marsh remembered something from his interviews back in the spring. A man named Curtis Doyle, who did seasonal landscaping and handyman work for several families on Oleander Street, including, at one point, both the Whitfields and the Coopers, had an old work injury that gave him exactly that kind of limp. Curtis wasn't a stranger. He wasn't an outsider skulking around at night. He was the guy half the street had personally hired over the years to mow lawns, clean gutters, and fix fences. He'd been in and out of nearly every home involved, legitimately, invited, trusted, which meant he knew the layout of each house, the location of valuables, and, crucially, each family's schedule, because homeowners talk freely in front of the guy fixing their porch steps. It was Carol and Whitfield, in fact, who'd once mentioned to Curtis, in passing, exactly which Wednesday nights she'd be at her sister's. And it was Daniel Cooper who joked with Curtis, more than once, about their same weekend every month lake house trips. Even the Alvarez family, it turned out, had used Curtis for gutter cleaning the previous fall, and Mateo's football schedule, the one that led to his early return home, was posted publicly on the school's website, easy enough for anyone to check. Nobody suspected him. Why would they? He'd been trustworthy for years, the kind of quiet, reliable presence a neighborhood barely notices precisely because nothing ever seems wrong with him. Once investigators had a name, the rest moved quickly. Detective Marsh secured a search warrant for Curtis Doyle's home and truck. Inside, They found several items reported stolen from the first two break-ins, including some of Daniel Cooper's rare coins, still in their original folders, and Carol and Whitfield's missing jewelry, wrapped in a cloth at the bottom of a toolbox. Financial records painted a fuller picture. Curtis had fallen badly behind on medical bills related to the same old injury that gave him his limp, a workplace accident years earlier that had left him with recurring pain, mounting debt, and a landscaping business that was barely scraping by. It was a motive that, while it didn't excuse anything, at least explained why a man who'd worked honestly on that street for years had started stealing from the people who trusted him. Curtis Doyle was arrested that October. He was charged with multiple counts of burglary and one count of assault tied to the confrontation with Mark Palmer. Facing the weight of the physical evidence, the shoe print, the doorbell footage, the recovered property, he eventually pleaded guilty to a reduced set of charges and was sentenced to several years in prison. For Oleander Street, the arrest brought relief and something harder to shake. The betrayal wasn't just that their homes had been violated. It was that the person doing it had been let in the front gate over and over for years. He'd sat on porches, taken sweet tea from grieving widows, played catch in the yard with kids who now flinched at the mention of his name. In the years since, Oleander Street has mostly gone back to being Oleander Street, a quiet stretch of houses where the mail still comes at 11 and the trash still goes out on Tuesdays. But something fundamental changed. Doorbell cameras appeared on almost every porch within a year. Neighbors stopped announcing their travel plans quite so freely. Spare keys came out from under flower pots. And the easy, unguarded trust that had defined the street for 60 years never quite came all the way back. Tyler Briggs, the teenager wrongly suspected, still mows lawns on the street today, though he said in the years since that it took a long time before some of those same neighbors looked him in the eye again the way they used to. It's a story that isn't really about a single thief in the end. It's about how much of our safety depends on the assumption that the people closest to us, the ones we let into our homes, our routines, our conversations, are exactly who they seem to be. Most of the time they are. But it only takes one person who isn't and knows your schedule better than you think to remind an entire street just how thin that assumption really is. That's the story of Oleander Street. If you enjoyed this one, let me know in the comments what other kind of case you'd like covered next. And if you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, now's the time. It's free. It takes 2 seconds. Hit the bell too so you get notified the moment the next case drops. As always, stay safe out there.